Well, thank you. Thank you. Obviously, it's a little better trip in here this time than the last time I spoke to you all at the conclusion of the second special session. Today, obviously, we made tremendous progress in stabilizing our finances, in restoring accountability, making sure that we have efficiency, transparency in government. And look, this plan is not perfect, but that's the nature of a compromise. But it puts us on a more solid foundation and achieves many, if not all, of the goals that we set out to accomplish. First of all, and I've got some higher education leaders in front of me, and as much as I love them, this isn't about them, it's about our kids. The plan that we have that moved out of the House today, and a plan that is funded, will allow us to stabilize higher education, fully fund the TOPS program, fund Go Grants at an 8% increase over last year, and by the way, the largest amount for need-based Go Grants in our state's history. Allow our district attorneys to continue their important work, continue the SNAP program for the most vulnerable citizens of our state, and a whole host of other critical priorities that up until today we didn't know for sure would be funded come July 1st. And it took a compromise. And by definition, and I've said it before, and it's certainly true, and you can see what this looks like. When you compromise, you accept some things you don't want in exchange for getting some things that you do want. And so while you're happy you can get there and you solve the immediate crisis and you bring about some resolution, you're not ecstatic because you think you could have done better. But that's what everybody thinks today, because this plan had something for everybody, but everybody for nothing. And that's what I said when I spoke to the legislature on Monday. But I want you to think about things in total. We are going to fund our most critical priorities. And there are going to be some other things that we need to do that we're not going to get around to this year. But I'm confident we're on a much better path. But at the same time, the net reduction in the tax burden of the state of Louisiana from this year to next is now 597 $597 million. So it's right at $600 million net reduction in the tax burden of the state of Louisiana from this year to next. But because of the strategic cuts rather than the catastrophic cuts, because of the efficiencies that we're creating, and because of the savings that we continue to find and work very hard to generate, especially out of the Medicaid expansion, we are able to do this where we can fund our most critical priorities. And so for those reasons, I stand before you really optimistic about our state going forward, that we are now in a position to continue the momentum that we have enjoyed, where our unemployment rate is almost 2 full percentage points lower than it was when I became governor, where we had the U.S. Department of Labor announce recently we've got more people working in Louisiana than at any point in our history, where we know that last year the unemployment in our state declined more than any other state in the nation. Let me say that differently because I saw Melinda look at me. No other state in the nation had an unemployment rate decline that was greater than ours. I think there was one or two that was right there close. We continue to land economic development deals. And by the way, the key to that is a sustained commitment to stabilizing higher education. Because employers, investors are going to put their money where they know they can be successful, and they cannot be successful today without trained, educated, skilled employees. That's what education does for you. That's what higher education does for you. And so we literally have to maintain that commitment if we want to create the opportunity that we want for our kids and grandkids. And that's what excites me most as I come before you. The plan that left out of the House today and went to the Senate for the second time in a decade funds higher education without a cut and fully funds the TOPS program. That's exactly what we needed to do. And I'm so proud that we were able to get it done. And I do want to stop for a moment and just thank the legislature and all the individual members of the legislature and the leadership. Many are in this room, but it is not easy. But at the beginning of the day this morning, I had a very good meeting with the speaker and others in my office, and we were able to come to an agreement and then go out and in a few hours really put it together. And it just shows what can happen when we are Louisianans first and foremost. I always knew that it was possible. It eluded us several times in the past, but we were able to get that done. Now, the Senate has the revenue bill, the Senate has the appropriations instrument. They get to look at those instruments and potentially change them as well. But there is no doubt that the hardest step in the process was taken today. The one that has been so difficult to make happen in the past, that happened today. So I'm excited about where we are from that perspective. I'm excited that I'm looking over here at all these young people, and I can feel better today about your future and our state. And I'm looking forward to the 7 years of stability that we're going to get. Think about that. We have lacked that for so long. 7 years of stability should come forth from the action taken by the House of Representatives today. It is my hope, it's actually my expectation, that we will come off of the negative watch list by our credit rating agencies that have kept us there because we have had a piecemeal ad hoc approach to our finances, and that eventually they will see that we are, in fact, moving forward in a much more responsible, prudent manner, and they will actually start to upgrade our credit rating. And every time they do that, it costs us less money to service the debt that we have already incurred, and that money can actually be invested in our priorities. So we've still got some work to do here in this special session. We're not over the goal line yet, but we're so much closer to it today as a result of the work in the House of Representatives. And so I want to thank them again, and there's many of the House members who are here, and thank you all very much. I've got members from both parties, and I really appreciate all of them. So we can take a deep breath and then come back to work tomorrow in the Senate, and then we're on a pace now that we should end this thing Sunday night. The Senate should send the instruments back on Sunday night. Hopefully the House will be in a mood to concur. We'll all go home. And as much as I love the legislature, I have no intention of calling you back before you come April next year for the regular session. So with that, I'll take a few questions. Yes, sir. It does seem like the November Thanksgiving is too far away, right? Look, we still have some work to do, but obviously I give thanks, and I think we all should, you know, that we were able to come together and do something that is hard. I've said it before, I would much rather be the governor who came in to preside over a surplus of any size, but not the largest deficit in our state's history. But you have to take the situation as you find it and be realistic and do what is required, not what is easy. And if this were easy to do, I promise you we would have done it a long time ago. It is not easy. But we're in a much better place, and so to your question, we should give thanks. Yes, ma'am? Well, look, it's pretty obvious. I came in saying that what we ought to do in order to adequately fund all of our critical priorities and set the stage going forward is to make sure that the REC forecasted state, general fund revenue stayed the same next year as this year. And that would require $648 million. And I don't have the precise figure for you today, but I think what we raised rather than 648 is about 540. So we're about $148 million below where I thought we ought to be. And so I think that sums up pretty clearly what I gave up in terms of the compromise. And as a result, look, we enter into the next budget year, and there are certain agencies that we know we're going to have to come back and do supplemental appropriations for next year because we are not budgeting appropriately for them, sufficiently for them. And but at the end of the day, I think we're in a relatively good place. We're certainly in a much better place than we would have been had no part of the penny been maintained. But think about that again. I asked for 648. I think what we will have appropriated at the end of the day and is about $100 million less than that to fix our problem. Yes, ma'am. Well, look, first of all, we've accomplished an awful lot aside from the fiscal issues, but the fiscal issues have dominated. There's no doubt about it, and they've required us to have a number of special sessions in addition to our regular sessions, one of which was fiscal in nature, where not a single structural tax reform got out of the House of Representatives, as you know. But we have done some great things. We have done the best, most comprehensive criminal justice reform, not just in our state's history. I would ask you to compare what we did last year with any state in the nation about criminal justice reform. As I stand before you at this podium, for the first time in decades, Louisiana is not the incarceration capital of the United States of America. And we are safer as a result of it because our system is smarter. And we are going to improve public safety. We're going to reinvest the savings. That gets easier to do as you're less constrained in the budget, which should be the case going forward, but we know that that's going to happen. The rate of uninsured in our state of Louisiana since I became governor in terms of health insurance has gone from about 24% to somewhere around 8 or 9%. Think about that. In a state that has long been too poor and long had some of the least favorable health outcomes in the country and the highest rates of uninsured, we now have 470,000 working adults with health insurance and access to primary and preventive care. And that is tremendously positive. And by the way, in the fiscal year that we are concluding right now, the savings to the state was $317 million because we expanded health insurance to 470,000 people. And so we've done those things in addition to working towards that lower unemployment rate, the economic growth, landing our biggest economic development deals in our state's history, and for the first time, actually now for the second time, funding higher education without a cut and fully funding our TOPS program. Yes, ma'am. Well, my conversations with them all along have been that if they got a relatively clean bill that didn't introduce something exotic, they were likely to send it back the way they got it. So there was some, as you know, there was some discussion whether the House should just send over a bill expecting the Senate to change it and send it back, perhaps at a higher rate to generate more revenue and set up a vote on concurrence that could happen as late as Wednesday night of next week. And that's the path that was followed in the last special session. It didn't end too well. And so leaders of the Senate have been telling me for the last couple of weeks not to expect that to happen again. And so I expect that the Senate will pass the same revenue instruments, House Bill 10, that they got without changes and not require any action by the House when it comes back to them. And quite frankly, that's the long pole in the tent, to use some terminology that I used to use in the Army a lot, because that's the 70 vote instrument. The other is the budget, and typically there's more flexibility there because you need 53 votes, and we'll just see what happens with that. Any other questions? Yes, sir. You know, I spoke to a representative today who I think was one of the last ones that happened to, and it's unfortunate. You know, in the governor's office, there's a cabinet, and when you open the cabinet, there's every member of the House and the Senate, and you can see whether they vote red or green. But you don't need that anymore because you've got access to the computer and the TV. So just for my amusement, I do have that button now for the bollards, and no, obviously not. Any other questions? Well, look, thank y'all very much. I see a lot of representatives in here. Go home and get yourself some good rest over the weekend. Come back Sunday night, and let's knock this thing out and go back to your homes, your districts, your businesses, and then have a great summer. God bless y'all. Thank you very much.